I think cities are extraordinary marvels that have been, yes, made by human beings, but are beyond the comprehension of anyone and everybody. So you can be a planner and you can understand a city to an extent from above, but you can be a drifter, an explorer, a cyclist, a walker. You can explore the city in so many different ways, physically, but it also has all the layers of the people in it and the things that have happened in it, and the things, of course, that might happen in it. I think the city is an amalgam of all these factors of course, work, money, production, retail, leisure, like all those categories that we know, but it's also an amalgam of music, literature, movie world, of fashion and design and lifestyle. In the Italian context, which I'm very influenced by, only recently have you been able to study design in schools, because every designer was an architect. And so the architect, when you go to Italy and you do work for a company, they call you an architect, whether you are an architect or not. So there's a kind of understanding that is South European. And then in England, I think, as you suggested, architecture and design have tended to be very split. In fact, when I was a student, I was very interested in fashion, and not because the clothes were nice or because necessarily I wanted to dress up, but because I thought that the system of expression in fashion was more instantly connected to the city, and it had a much faster production time than architecture. So I think in many respects architecture as a culture is quite lost. It's the prevailing style, which is built in Britain, is very pared down. It's like a kind of cartoon vernacular. It seems to me that the way that architects have responded to this kind of opulent culture is curiously to absolve responsibility, to kind of say, I'm going to design you something which has an archetypical form, because I don't want you, dear public, to have to think about anything more demanding or exciting. So that's one aspect of contemporary architecture. But then I look at the work of students at the AA, at the Bartlett, at the RCA, and I see a whole other thing where there's a benign but flowing architecture, where architecture is looked at as experience. And it's always true, at any time there are different schools of thought. But at the moment, on the one hand, I think we need to think cleverly in order to be able to make architecture which is modest in terms of its cost and production, but is rich in terms of its culture. The classic modernism is not my main point of reference. I was more interested in the Italians who were at the time making absurd statements of how architecture could be pushed to the limit through Archizoom and Superstudio. So I suppose in that respect I'm a true post-modernist in the broadest sense of the term, although I never affiliated myself with the postmodern movement at the time it was happening. Soon after I graduated, maybe 2 years later, I suddenly got very interested in Baroque, in the Italian Baroque, and to some extent the German Baroque, and the possibilities of a historical form of architecture that could be a resource for contemporary thinking. And ever since then, in fact I'm going to speak about this evening, there's a kind of there's a thinking and a kind of an awareness of the world that I like to think that I care about. I'm not an academic of the Renaissance by any sense of the word, or of the pre-Renaissance, but there's a kind of attention to the way in which any cultural phenomena came to be the result of a human ambition. I would advocate that everyone tunes into the reality they're part of, but doesn't take it at face value. Always look behind and underneath and on top, around. It's always more complex than you think. At least I've discovered that.